I'm a fan of this man's work. Sitting on a Hill, which we've had Kevin Bacon here, right?
Yeah.
And we talk about that show. I can't wait for it to come back. He's in it. Remote drop movie for me. Michael Clayton is a remote drop film for me.
Great film.
I could make a case even it's the best George Clooney movie out there.
Ooh.
Which is
I would entertain
which might
that.
be a pop culture hot take.
I would entertain that.
Okay. But for the purposes of this being a sports show as well as an entertainment show, and the fact that this gent just looped a couple of rounds at Winged Foot side of the United States Open, and the fact that he played easily outside of, I guess, maybe Bagger Vance, the most famous caddy in the history of film,
Nice.
wearing his Bushwood Country Club hat while looping, where he looped as a young man himself. The actor who played Danny Noonan from Caddyshack, Michael O'Keefe, here on the Rich Eisen Show. How's that for an intro, Michael?
Oh my God! I'm gonna memorize it and put it on a card to hand to friends.
I mean, it was great seeing you out there with the Bushwood Country Club lid. Walk me through how you. Well, I know you wrote an article for golf.com essentially saying that you're up for looping this week and you got on the bag. So walk me through all this, Michael.
Well, it was just kind of a lark. It's the 40th anniversary of the film being released, and golf.com said, "Do you want to write something?" And I thought, I do know the Winged Foot. I did train there when I was getting ready to make Caddyshack. I spent about 6 weeks up there with the pro at the time, Tom Neoporti, his son Joe, and their assistant Dave Scholes, and they just kind of helped me get my swing together. And so I felt like, what have I got to lose? And I also thought my chances were about as likely as Carl Spackler winning the Masters.
Right.
And then Mike Breed, the teaching pro, who's got a show on Sirius Radio, asked me for an interview, and I said, sure. And afterwards he said, hey, listen, if you really want this to happen, I think I've got somebody for you, so you got to let me know if you're for real. And I was like, yeah. And, then as soon as we hung up, he got a hold of Danny Balin, and Danny got, involved and put me on his bag. And so I just did 2 days, carrying a pro bag over at the Winged Foot, which was really quite a journey, I got to tell you.
Now, I mean, Balin's story is amazing. He's the head pro at Fresh Meadow Country Club in Lake Success, New York. And because of the pandemic, the PGA Championship, as well as the U.S. Open, said, we're just going to take the top 3 from the list of the PGA Club Pro Player of the Year list of last year, and he got in both tournaments because of it. And that's
right.
how you wound up with him looping.
It's a fluke year. I think one of the reasons I think this story took off and got legs was because there's this, we've all been quarantined for 6 months, and sports are just kind of coming back, but the lack of the gallery in golf, the lack of fans in any of the other sports, I think, is daunting for people, and they're looking for some kind of, way to get inspired the way we do when we watch sports. And this story, I think, is somewhat connected to stories like Francis Ouimet winning the 1913 U.S. Open as a caddy at the Brookline Country Club, or Greg Puga, the great caddy from East L.A. who caddies up at Bel Air, getting into the Masters in 2000. After winning the Mid-Am. Those types of stories, I think, spark the imagination, and I think Caddyshack and Danny Noonan just kind of tick that box for people.
It did, and then just seeing you caddying there. So you, when you said that you spent time there, were you a caddy at Winged Foot before?
Yeah, I caddied there when I was in high school in the summer in 71 and 72. My dad was friends with Gene Hayden, who was a legendary caddy master at the time. The pro at the time was Claude Harmon, and his 3 sons, Craig and Billy and Butch, were, Billy was a teenager, and Craig and Butch were in their 20s. They used to go out and just bomb the courses there. And the first hole on the East course is right next to the Caddyshack, so anytime the Harmon boys were going out there, we'd all just sort of like kind of sneak out of the Caddyshack, trying not to get in trouble, and watch them tee off just because they were such legendary hitters.
Wow.
And then the practice green is also right there by the Caddyshack, and there were these sand traps there And their dad, Claude Harmon, used to give lessons. And to this day, it's indelibly etched in my mind watching Claude Harmon give a sand trap lesson. And he had this kind of magic feel. So yesterday when we went off on the front nine, there's a guy at the starters booth, and he looks at me, and I look at him, and he goes, "How you doing? I'm one of the Harmon boys." And I said, "Are you Billy Harmon?" And he said, "Yeah." And I said, "Man, it has been about 50 years
No
since
way.
I've seen you." It was unbelievable, and there he was.
And had he never seen Caddyshack, though, Michael?
Of course he had, but we hadn't seen each other in 50 years.
Oh,
And the
my
last time I
gosh.
saw him, he was a 19-year-old kid. And there he was, probably in his early 70s. And he, turns out, is close friends with my brother Billy, who's a former president of Winged Foot. And, my brother Billy's actually like a civilian and an adult with a job, So he can afford to join Winged Foot,
So now,
but he's...
So I've got a few questions for you here, Michael.
Sure.
Michael O'Keefe, the actor, joining me here after he just looped for Danny Ballin, who's got a great story again. There's Danny on the right, and then Danny Noonan on the left, right there on our screen. So when you said there was a Caddyshack that you were part of at Winged Foot in 1971, tell me Winged Foot was, in fact, being run by a judge named Smales. Please tell me that. Did that actually happen? No?
I wish there were some legendary characters. Some of the more memorable characters were the caddies. Like there was a great caddy named Tasty, and he was hilarious. And he was one of these guys that had a penchant for wine and was always getting in trouble with the caddy master, Gene Hayden. And Gene, even when you got even good news from Gene would put the fear of God in you, because he'd call out your name when you got Olivia, Michael O'Keefe, get JJ Gagliardi, go down to 111 West. You'd be like, oh my God, I think I just had a heart attack. All right. And then the guy who ran the club room was named Mo, and you could not understand a word he said. He talked so fast, and it was so kind of muted in some kind of, I don't know what. You come in and say, Mo, I need JJ Gagliardi. He'd go, yeah, JJ Gagliardi, let me get that. Saying something like, yeah, let me get that bag for you. But nobody really knew what he was saying, so we all just kind of nodded and said, okay. Tasty would get into a fight with Gene, and if you got into trouble with Gene, he'd send you down the hill. Tasty, go down the hill. Oh my God, it's such a time.
And I imagine then the groundskeeper did not have in his house Kentucky bluegrass and California sensimilla together. That did not happen as well, is what you're saying.
Well, it was the 70s, so it might have been that way back then.
By the way, I literally could do this for another hour with you, Michael O'Keefe, but I got to get some stories from the set. 40 years ago, at the time, give me your favorite story, whether it involves Rodney Dangerfield or Ted Knight, who I think is a comic genius. Anything that was ad-libbed with Chevy Chase, Bill Murray, obviously. Give me your favorite story.
Bill was just taking off. He had just booked Saturday Night Live. Meatballs was in the can. It wasn't even out yet. It was only his second film. None of his dialogue was written. So when he showed up and he did that Cinderella story about winning the Masters,
come on,
or looping for the Dalai Lama, he wrote it with Harold's kind of, help editing right there on the spot, so his genius was evident even back then. Chevy had already done Fletch, which I loved, and I also saw him do National Lampoon's Lemmings down in the West Village when I was a kid, which was an amazing knockoff of Woodstock that National Lampoon did. Ted, like you, I was a huge fan of his from Mary Tyler Moore, and Rodney Dangerfield was my dad's favorite comedian. We used to watch him on Ed Sullivan. First day on the set, I go and I say hi to Rodney, and I smile and say hello, and he goes, "Oh, kid, your teeth are terrible. My nephew's a dentist. Maybe I can set you up with him. He can help you out." And I'm like, "Oh, thanks, Rodney. That's great. Let's go on camera together." So he kind of reads me, and he goes, "Don't worry about it." He goes, "Florida, huh? It's like a sauna with gnats."
Always on.
Always on. Did anything else ad-libbed from you or from?
That famous, do you do drugs, Danny, every day? That was that's made it onto a few T-shirts. That was definitely an ad-lib.
Okay.
Most of Chevy's, like when Chevy did that knockoff of the $6 Million Man sound when he was making all those putts.
Yep.
I didn't even know what he was going to do until he started doing it. So I just, it was all I could do to keep a straight face. And the great thing on that film was watching Harold and Ramis, our director, and Doug Kenny realize that in Chevy and Bill and Ted and Rodney, they had a kind of modern Marx Brothers thing going on, which of course made me Geppo Marx, the unfunny, one that could help with the bags. So they just, rocked that thing as far as they could. And that's why we have the film we have. They threw out the script about 9 or 10 days into the shooting. And then they just let these guys really just roll. And Harold was really, really adept at kind of wrangling them into a shape that would work. And, 40 years later, we've got what we've got.
What do you mean they threw out the script? They just said, obviously keeping the spine of it. But, again, the scene with you and Ted Knight, where he's trying to ask if you stand for goodness or badness. I mean, that's one of my favorite scenes involving you in this film, Michael. I mean, you're laughing about it now 40 years later. How did you keep a straight face when he's asking you, about mow my lawn and making that noise and stuff like that?
I used to keep a safety pin in my pocket, and if I thought I was going to laugh, I'd pop it and stab myself in the thigh.
Are you serious?
Of course not, but that sounds good, doesn't it?
It sounds great.
I'm gullible when it comes to this sort of stuff. But I mean,
well, and the other great thing about the Winged Foot, is that I trained for the film there. I went back there and trained with Joe Neaporti and Tom Neaporti, his dad, and I was out on the range every day for 6 weeks. And one of the things I wanted to mention on your show is there's a great GoFundMe page called Richie's Gift, which is the thing that's set up to support the caddies during the pandemic at Winged Foot, because like everybody else, they've been suffering and out of work, and now that the Open's there, none of the members are taking the local caddies out. So anybody who wants to contribute can go to that GoFundMe page, Richie's Gift, and just throw a couple of bucks their way, and I'm sure they'd appreciate it.
Richie's Gift at GoFundMe. I mean, that is obviously a worthy visit to GoFundMe to make sure that put a little bit extra scratch in these guys' pockets. Michael, thanks for the call, and it was just great seeing you. How old is that Bushwood Country Club hat that you got on your lid?
Well, it's not 40 years old. My brother lost the original, I think, in a bar in North Carolina.
Come on.
In 1979. I'm sure if that ever surfaced, we could have an auction for that.
Come on.
But I want to tell you, man, I have a new respect for the professional caddies out there, because there's not one part of my body that's not sore except my teeth.
Yeah, I mean, is Danny ready? Did you get him ready?
Oh man, his caddy, he's a great guy named Mark Monteblot, and they were the frat brothers at Penn State, so they got a really good relationship, and I think he's got a shot. I think he's going to make the cut, and I'm really pulling for him. It'd be a great story, but that course is set up with so daunting. Steve Robideau is the name of the superintendent, and I'll tell you, the rough is like Dante's hell, and the greens, the front of those greens are like ski slopes.
Right.
Anybody that doesn't get it about 7 or 8 yards onto the front of all those greens is going to be, getting to their ball a lot sooner than they'd like coming off the tee, if you know what I mean.
I do know that. I know. And I'm just knowing that, you could use a rest. I hope the pool was open for you yesterday.
Well, they let me use the pond.
It's just, honestly, I could literally go on and on like this, and I know you must hear this stuff absolutely all the time. So what do you?
Hey man, for you, Rich, I'm a huge fan. I'm
right back at you.
I've been a fan for years, and I'm happy to talk to you guys. I had the time of my life, and I have Danny Balin and Mike Breed to thank for it, because Mike's the guy that hooked us up.
Excellent. And again, Rich, what's the name of the GoFundMe page again?
It's called Richie's Gift on GoFundMe.
Richie's Gift. When is City on a Hill coming back? What's going on with this?
We just got notice they're going to start filming again.
Phenomenal.
So I'm hoping soon.
I love that show.
And I love that show. Kevin Bacon's a legendary actor, and he's great on the show. And Aldous Hodge, his co-star boy, he's really something.
He's been here too, talking about it too. And again, I really mean it. Michael Clayton for me is a remote drop movie. That movie, I think that movie's perfect. I don't find a bad frame from that film.
Would have to, I would support your argument that it's the best thing Clooney has on film, because it's a standout performance from him, and I think it's one of the reasons why is because it was written so well by the writer-director Tony Gilroy, and it was his first directing job. and he knocked that thing out of the park. And he had to direct not only Clooney, who's no slouch as a director, but Sidney Pollack, who's one of our great American directors.
That's right, and I think that was the last film he was in, actually, before he passed away.
That's right, yeah, and then we lost him,
And you were in a couple scenes with him too. That had to be something else for you in your career.
Oh man, it was the treat of a lifetime. It was it's a job I always like talking about.
Thanks for the call. It was great seeing you out there. Let's do this again. Let's keep doing this.
I'm hoping to get a bag in the Masters, Rich. Spread the word.
I don't know, man. I mean, that might be a very tall order. You might have to get the pond in that one, to use the phrase.
It could happen. I know the greens break towards Rays Creek. Come on, give me a shot.
Okay. I think behind Rays Creek there is a lumberyard, so let's be careful.
Okay, pal.
Take care of yourself, man. Thanks for the call.
Rich, take care.
What a blast. What a fun chat. Hey, you watched all the way to the end. Thanks for that. Watch more right here.